Hello and welcome to another episode of the DVD Graveyard. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at City of the Living Dead from 1980, directed by Lucio Fulci. This film was also known as The Gates of Hell, and this is actually the first film in a sort of loose trilogy that Fulci did, known as the Gates of Hell trilogy, and that includes this movie, City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, from 1981, and then House by the Cemetery, also from 1981. And it's a trilogy in a loose sense. Like they have no narrative connection, but they all kind of share the same sort of kind of ideas going on in them. So it's kind of a trilogy in the same way that like Dario Argento's Three Mothers trilogy is where they're not really connected, like I said, story wise, but they just those are a little bit more connected than these are. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. So Lucio Fulci is one of my favorite Italian directors. He did some of the best gore. His stories were often very convoluted and kind of ridiculous and sometimes didn't really make a lot of sense, but he did gore like no one else did around that time. And I love the look of Lucio Fulci's zombies. He did some of the best zombie work that I've ever seen, and of course he's very famous for having directed Zombie 2, or Zombie Flesh Eaters, whatever you want to refer to it as. I usually call it Zombie 2, the unofficial Italian sequel to Dawn of the Dead. So let's just get right into this movie. I have right here the Blue Underground DVD release, and I'll read the plot synopsis off the back of it, and prepare yourself because it's a super long plot synopsis. So it says, "Woe be unto him who opens one of the seven gateways to hell, because through that gateway evil will invade the world." Then it goes, "The seven gates of hell have been torn open, and in 3 days the dead shall rise and walk the earth." As a reporter, Christopher George of Pieces, and a psychic, Catriona, sorry, I almost called her Katerina, Catriona McCall of the Beyond, race to close the portals of the damned. They encounter a seething nightmare of unspeakable evil. The city is alive with the horrors of the living dead. Directed and co-written by the legendary Lucio Fulci, Zombie and The Beyond, City of the Living Dead features some of the maestro's most shocking and controversial sequences of all time. Blue Underground proudly presents the definitive version of Fulci's hallucinogenic masterpiece of horror. So that's just talking about the DVD a little bit, so I won't read the rest of that. But honestly, that plot synopsis on the back actually makes the movie sound a lot more interesting than it actually is, because I'll be honest with you, this movie is not one of Fulci's best as far as plot-wise goes. Like I said, most of his movies are kind of convoluted, but I do enjoy this movie. It is a lot of fun, and it's got a lot of really great sequences in it, especially gore scenes. It's got a lot of just really good, like I said, really good effects, really good atmosphere. There's a lot of things about this movie to enjoy, but having said that, it's not one of Fulci's best films. But again, we'll get into that. So, like it said on the back, this movie stars Christopher George, who plays Peter, who is a reporter, and Catriona McCall, who plays Mary. And she's actually in all three of these films. She's in City of the Living Dead, she's in The Beyond, and she is in House by the Cemetery. So that is another kind of connection that these three films have together. She's a great actress. She does great in this movie. And then, of course, we have Carlo De Majo, who plays Jerry. I think that's how you say that. De Majo or something. DeMajo, I think is how you say that. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. And then we get Janet Agren, who plays Sandra. So this film opens up with a seance. Mary is in a seance, and we witness the hanging of a priest in the town of Dunwich. And like I said, Mary sees this in a vision, and this kind of immediately causes some of the dead to start, they rise. And immediately coming out of this seance, Mary dies, and she's taken away in an ambulance. And then the police come and investigate, and they're just kind of checking everything out, seeing kind of what's going on. The guy keeps accusing them of smoking grass and doing cocaine and stuff, and basically telling them that they're tripping and that, none of this happened. And then out of nowhere, they just see this random fire, off in the corner of the room, which kind of signals the opening of one of the, these seven gates of hell. So they kind of trip out about that. They're like, "Oh, that's strange." And then we go back to Dunwich, where we see this abandoned house, and we meet Bob, who is, I guess, this just kind of homeless guy, or he's just this guy that kind of wanders around the town of Dunwich, and nobody likes him. We'll touch on that more later, but nobody really likes Bob. And he goes into this house and he pulls out a blow up doll, and he blows up this blow up doll, and he's about to, I guess, go fuck this thing. And then he looks over in the corner and notices there is the corpse of a rotting baby over in the corner, or what I'm assuming is a baby. And so that happens. We get some more just kind of random things happening around Dunwich. Like that's when we meet Jerry and Sandra, and then we also meet what is her name? Emily, the other girl. And Jerry is, I guess, a psychiatrist, and Sandra is one of his patients. They're kind of, just kind of hanging out in his office, and the cat that's in Sandra's lap attacks her. And so just little odd things like that happen. Like there's this bar where like the glass, this mirror shatters, and there's a crack in the wall that appears. So just kind of random stuff starts kind of happening in Dunwich. And then we flash, and that's when we meet Peter for the first time. And he kind of starts his investigation, and he's a reporter, like I said. So he's just kind of looking around. And he goes to the cemetery where Mary was buried. And he's kind of looking around there, and the gravedigger guys that are there, which one of the guys who is there, I swear he's in Cannibal Holocaust, but I don't know if he is or not. I didn't bother to check, but he looks just like one of the guys from Cannibal Holocaust. But anyway, they leave, and as Peter's kind of looking around the cemetery, he's about to leave, and he hears screaming coming from Mary's coffin. And so he's like, "Oh, she's alive." So he grabs this pickaxe and he starts kind of trying to break into this coffin, and the pickaxe is coming through. And this is a great scene when we see Mary inside of it kind of waking up, and the pickaxe is coming through and almost hitting her directly in the face, which is a really kind of tense scene. But he breaks it open and she's screaming, and it's a really, really bad dub of her screaming, which that's commonplace for a lot of these Italian films, which it's not a complaint. It doesn't bother me at all. But if dubbing is not your thing, then this will not be for you, because a lot of most of the movie is dubbed. So anyway, he breaks her out. They go back to meet the medium from the beginning of the film when Mary died. And she basically tells him that she saw the city of the living dead in a vision. And she saw this priest, who Father Thomas is his name, hang himself. And so the medium tells them that they basically have to go to Dunwich. They have to find this town, and they have to close this portal before All Saints' Day, which is in like 2 or 3 days, or else the dead will forever walk the earth. So that's kind of our main plot that's going on. That's really kind of where we're... what their motivation is, why they're going to find Dunwich. So Peter and Mary leave. They have no idea where Dunwich is. They've never heard of it. They can't find it on the map. So they just take off, and they're going to locate it. So then we flash back to Dunwich. And that's one complaint, I guess I could say, about this movie, or not really even complaint, but it's just one thing that I've noticed kind of messes up the pacing of this film. There's a lot of back and forth, and I've shortened a lot of it. I've cut a lot of just kind of filler out, because there is just kind of a lot of filler, but there's a lot of back and forth from Dunwich to Peter and Mary to Dunwich to Peter and Mary. So it's cutting back and forth pretty much constantly for quite a while. So when we get back to Dunwich, Emily meets with Bob, and I guess she meets him at the place where he stays, and he's just freaking out. He's terrified because he found that baby corpse where he was going to fuck his blow-up doll, and so he freaks out and he just kind of leaves. And then the priest kind of shows up just out of nowhere and shoves this pile of like worms and guts and stuff into Emily's mouth, and then we kind of cut away from that, And we're just kind of at this point bouncing around Dunwich and just kind of seeing all the stuff that's going on. We come up to this other scene, which this is probably my favorite part of the movie. Is there's the scene where this couple is making out in their car, and they're just kind of, he's feeling up on her, and it's really creepy because they're right outside this kind of old broke down sort of looking building, and there's fog, and it's just a really kind of very atmospheric moment, and I really like the whole feeling that this scene kind of invokes. It's just very, very interesting. Like I said, this is definitely one of my favorite scenes of the whole film. And they're kind of making out, and he's kind of groping on her and stuff. And then the guy turns on the headlights, and they see the priest hanging from this broke down kind of building. And then he disappears. The guy's trying to start the car, and then the girl that's in there, she looks and can see the priest through the window, or sees him in the rearview mirror or something like that. And she locks eyes with him. And so she's just holding the gaze, and it's just kind of building and building and building, and the music is building, and she starts to bleed from her eyes. And she just bleeds more and more and more, and then she kind of starts to foam at the mouth. And at this point, the guy's just kind of looking at her, and he's trying to get out of the car, but he can't. It's locked. And he's just looking at her while she's looking at this priest. I guess he doesn't see the priest, but then she starts to puke her guts up, literally. Like, she starts to vomit and hurls up intestines and her heart and stomach and all this in this really, really badass looking scene. Like, I love this so much. This is classic Fulci gore, and it's just fucking awesome. He just starts to puke these guts out, and it just looks great. And then the guy kind of turns around, and we get one of, I think, 3 of these what I call head squeeze deaths. And what she does is basically grabs the back of the guy's hair and squeezes it, and all the guts kind of come through her hand. And it's a really good looking effect. Like, I really like it. It's actually, again, one of my favorite effects in the movie. And Fulci must have liked it a lot too, because he uses it, like I said, I think 3 times in this movie. We get this kind of exact same effect. And a lot of the effects in this movie are really good. I don't think there's a bad effect at all in the whole movie, which is a positive that I can give to this. Even that the rotting kind of baby corpse that you see at the beginning of this movie looks really damn good. It's classic Fulci. It's the sinewy, covered with worms kind of corpse. It just looks great. I love it. So then we cut back to the police, who have found Emily's body, and there's the coroner there, who is played by none other than Lucio Fulci himself. And they basically think, they're just like, it's Bob. Like, they think it's Bob. They're like, thank God we found him before when he went in the woods with that Anne, whatever her last name is. I didn't get her last name, but he's like, thank God we found him before he could do what he wanted to do with that Anne girl. So Bob kind of has this history around the town. Everybody's like, he's a piece of shit. He did this, blah, blah, blah. He's just got a really bad past. And that's when we kind of find out that there's a lot of people going missing and just turning up dead in the town of Dunwich, and they're all kind of blaming Bob. They all think it's Bob. So after that, we just kind of see some more strange things that kind of start going around, in Dunwich. Like, there's a corpse in the funeral home. Whenever the family goes to Emily's funeral, one of the corpses bites the guy on the hand, which we don't see this. We just kind of see the aftermath. But one of the corpses bites the guy. The priest appears to Bob in that abandoned house. Bob goes back to that abandoned house, I guess, to try to get nasty with this fuck doll again. And the priest appears to him there. Emily appears to her little brother, John, is his name, outside the window of his bedroom, which is a really creepy scene. That's a really cool kind of visual shot. So she just kind of appears to him, freaks him out. Runs down to his parents, starts freaking out, and they're like, "Oh, Emily's dead, son. Emily's not with us anymore." That whole kind of thing. And then a corpse that we see earlier in the funeral home appears inside of Sandra's house. So when that happens, Jerry comes to Sandra's house, and they basically kind of start to look around the house to make sure that this corpse is not still in here, because they go back to the kitchen and it's disappeared and all this other stuff. And they realize that stuff is starting to get kind of strange around Dunwich. So they decide to leave and kind of go investigate what's going on around the town. So around this time, that's when Peter and Mary finally find a route to Dunwich. Because this whole time throughout the film, it's cutting back to them just driving, pretty much like they're just driving trying to find Dunwich. So that's kind of what they're doing most of the movie, and which is funny because you think that at the beginning of this movie when you first meet them, you think that they're going to be the main characters, but we kind of shift more towards Sandra and Jerry at this point. They kind of become more of the the focus of this, until of course they all come together pretty soon. But before that happens, and one other thing, you find out whenever Peter and Mary, when they're on their way to town, or whenever they finally find a route to Dunwich, you find out that it's actually built on the ruins of the original Salem village from the witch trials. So I thought that was really interesting. And then, of course, the whole Dunwich thing, that's a Lovecraft reference. So I thought that was neat that Fulci kind of brought that into his story, I guess, just to kind of add some lore to it. But anyway, before the group meets, like I was saying, we meet the Anne girl that everybody has been talking about. Bob was supposed to, he was, I guess, trying to rape her or something like that. And she's in, I guess, her father's garage, and Bob has taken refuge in the dad's car in this garage. And she goes and gets some weed, and she's like, hey, Bob, why don't you smoke a J with me? And about this time, that's when the father catches them together, and he freaks out, and he's like, Bob, you piece of shit, I'm gonna fucking kill you, blah, blah. And so this is where we get this really, really iconic scene that I think a lot of people have probably seen from this movie. And it's one of the coolest kills one of the coolest effects and one of the gnarliest kills in the movie. And it's not even done by a zombie. But the guy basically takes Bob and he sits him down on this table next to this like impact drill thing. And he turns it on, and we get that classic Fulci, one shot on Bob, one shot on the drill as it gets closer and closer and closer and closer. And you think that Bob's going to get away. You think he's going to get out of this until the drill drills directly into his head and goes all the way through the other side. And this is such a damn good looking effect. Like the prosthetic or the prosthetic head looks so good. I mean, it's great. I was gonna say, this is a gnarly fucking kill in this movie, and I really like it. Probably my second favorite scene in the movie. It's just crazy. Like I said, the effect looks so good. There's so much blood. It is such a brutal way to kill somebody, and I can't believe that this guy just literally flat out just fucking murders him. Like, I mean, he's just like who's the real piece of shit, especially because you find out that he wasn't really doing anything with Anne. I guess him and Anne were just hanging out smoking weed, and everybody just assumed that Bob, because they didn't like him, they just assumed that he had ill intentions. So no more Bob. Bob is gone. Poor Bob. So Jerry and Sandra, they kind of start to investigate around the town, and they decide to go to the cemetery. And so Peter and Mary, obviously, they're looking for the grave of this priest, so they decide to go to the cemetery as well. They go there and they meet up, and Peter's like, who are you? They kind of meet for the first time, Jerry is like, who are you guys? And Peter's like, I'll explain. And then, of course, we skip the whole explanation, and then he's like, well, that's what happened, when they appear back at, I guess at Jerry's house, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And he kind of tells them, and they just, believe him, because, of course, there's strange things going on around town. At this point, we've seen little tidbits that zombies are starting to kind of appear more around the town, not blatantly, but that's kind of what it's hinted at is going on. So I guess they just believe him, and I mean, why not? It doesn't sound like nonsense at all. The priest hanging himself, and then the dead rising, and the gate from hell opening. It doesn't sound crazy at all. But Anyway, I guess this kind of seals the deal because and makes them believe because right about the time they get done talking about this, the windows in this room fly open and fucking worms just start flying in the window like little grub worms, which is really cool and really nasty because it's just getting all over them. It's getting all over the phone, getting in their mouths, all this good shit. It's just a hurricane of worms, which is really cool. I like that. I always like worms. Fulci was a big fan of worms. There's always tons and tons of fucking worms in his movies. So I like that. Right after this happens, Jerry gets a phone call he gets a phone call from John, which is Emily's little brother, that Emily has killed their parents and I guess eaten them. So they go to rescue him. When they get there, of course, we don't really see the parents' bodies. They just kind of like, oh my God, she mutilated them, So we know the parents are dead. So now that they have John, they leave, and Jerry tells Sandra to take John back to his studio, that they'll meet back with him there just to keep him safe. So they head to the funeral parlor. And when they get there, that's when we see that all the caskets are completely empty. And, hinting at all of them have risen from the dead. And now they've come to kill everyone. And that is whenever Emily appears again. And she kills Sandra, which kind of took me off guard the first time I saw this. Because I did not expect Sandra to die. Because at this point, you kind of expect her to be one of the main characters. And that's one thing I guess I can say about Fulci is, he does have a lot of these random kind of deaths, but he subverts your expectations a little bit sometimes. Like you think, at this point you think Sandra, Peter, Jerry, and Mary are all going to be okay, but no. Sandra is killed by the old head squeeze. We get that effect again, which it looks awesome. I'm not complaining by any means. It's just like I said, I think Fulci really, really liked this effect. And I don't blame him. I thought it was badass. So Sandra's killed by the old head squeeze. John runs away, and we basically see that the whole town is empty. And I love all these shots of John just kind of walking around the town, and we see all these just kind of panning shots of the empty town with the fog and the wind. It looks really cool, and it sets up a really, really cool atmosphere in this town. It makes it feel really spooky, very isolated. Of course, not everybody in this town is dead. I guess they just couldn't afford any more extras, but there's nobody in this town. We see that the town is basically empty. So as John's kind of wandering around the town, he's attacked by a couple zombies. We see that they're just kind of appearing out of nowhere. I think there's only a couple of them that he sees. And he comes up on Emily. He sees Emily who's about to attack him. And that's when Jerry just kind of appears out of nowhere. And he saves John. And he's like, run around the corner. There is a sheriff's car. So I guess the sheriff's still working tonight. So he tells John to go run there to the sheriff's car and get in. He'll be safe. So he runs to, he just leaves. John leaves. And Jerry turns back around and Emily's just gone. She just has disappeared. She disappears right before your very eyes. So after this, Jerry, Peter, and Mary all decide to go back to the cemetery after John goes off with the sheriff. He is safe at this point. So he kind of takes off. When they get to the cemetery, they finally find Father Thomas's family tomb, and they open it, and then they all enter the tomb. They crawl down into this crypt. And this is a really cool scene too, because everything down there is just really cool. It's an old decrepit crypt with bones and spider webs and just all it's just really spooky. And I really like this whole kind of scene too. I like the set that they built for this. It just looks really good. It's old, it's very kind of old and gothic looking. I really like it. It just looks really nice set. So they find his crypt and they open it, and you find that it's empty and it's broken. They're like, somebody broke out, maybe somebody broke through from the other side, and they're like, or maybe he broke out. So, because we know what happened here at this point. So They crawl through this crypt, and then they enter in a little bit deeper. And as they go a little bit further, that's when they see Sandra as a zombie. She's down in this crypt now for some reason. And she does the old head squeeze on Peter. So that's our third head squeeze, brain squish kill, whatever you want to call it. And again, Peter, at this point, you really think he's going to live, because, I mean, he's one of the more popular actors in this movie. All these guys are just fairly relatively unknown unless you're just hardcore Italian horror fans. But I mean, Christopher George, like I said, he's the one that's listed on the back of the cover art. Whenever you look it up, he and Mary, Catriona McCall is her name. But when you see them, they're usually the ones that are listed as your main characters. So it really took me off guard whenever he died. Like I said, for the first time. Seeing this for the first time, I should say. But so he dies. Peter dies. And then Mary kind of locks eyes with Sandra, zombie Sandra. And her eyes kind of start to bleed a little bit. And you're like, oh shit, now Mary's going to die. She's going to puke all of her guts out. And, so you're kind of waiting. And then Jerry kills Sandra, the zombie Sandra. He stabs her. And then Mary and Jerry continue through this crypt. And as they're going, more zombies begin to rise. And Mary's like, oh no, it's midnight. We're too late. It's All Saints Day. So they've made it kind of too late for All Saints Day. But they keep trying. They keep going. And because that really doesn't amount to too much, I will say. Anyway, they keep going and they reach the end of this crypt. And they're in this kind of open area of the crypt, which is, again, really creepy looking because it's got cobwebs and it's just really pretty looking in a dark and spooky kind of way. And they see Father Thomas. He appears before them and they're just kind of looking at him. He locks eyes with Mary. And again, Mary's eyes kind of start to bleed again. So you're just waiting for it. You're like, oh shit, Mary's going to get it for real this time. She's going to puke her guts out. And the whole time, all these zombies are coming up behind them. These old kind of corpsey, bony-looking zombies, which they look awesome, by the way. All the zombies in this movie look fantastic, by the way, if I didn't mention that. They all look fucking cool. I love Lucio Fulci's zombies very much. But they're all really just creepy looking. Like they're covered in cobwebs and shrouded, and they're all bony looking, and they're really cool. And it's really creepy just having them all kind of creeping up behind him. So Jerry picks up this wooden cross and he stabs Father Thomas with it, and Father Thomas begins to catch on fire. And while he's burning, all the other zombies start to catch on fire, and they're just kind of sitting there watching this, and we watch as Father Thomas kind of just burns to ash, and then the ash just kind of disappears, and all the other zombies, I guess, burn away and die. So they did it. They won. I guess they closed the gates of hell, I should say, and they sent Father Thomas to hell, I guess. And yeah, so I mean, the day it is won. So then they exit the tomb, and as they're crawling out of the tomb, we see the sheriff, and I guess the deputy. They're walking up with John. They're kind of holding his hands between them, and he's like, "Mary, Jerry, oh my goodness!" And he takes off running towards them. Now, this is probably the most divisive thing in the whole movie, I'll say. And one of my least favorite things about this movie, actually, I'll just be straightforward. This ending sucks. The ending really, really blows. I don't care for it at all because it's confusing. You don't really know what happens. Which I'll kind of, I'll explain what I think happened. I didn't read about this, and I haven't really watched any videos on it or anything like that. I haven't done the research on what actually happens in the ending, but I'll tell you what I think, or what I gathered from this ending. He sees Jerry and Mary coming out of this crypt, and he freaks out, and he takes off running towards them, and he's like, oh my goodness. He looks completely normal, keep in mind. And we see Mary, she's smiling, she's happy. John, I'm so happy to see you, even though she just met him, maybe 4 or 5 hours prior to this. This is a very unwarranted relationship and friendship that all these people have, after only knowing each other. Like I said, for at the most, probably 6 hours, these people have known each other. I guess, what they say, trauma bond. But anyway, he runs towards them, and we get this slow motion shot of John's face, and then it freezes, and we hear Mary scream. She's like, "Oh no!" And she screams, and then there's this little crackle effect, and then it cuts to black, and we roll credits. And if you're anything like me, the first time I saw this is one thing about this movie that's always bothered me, is the ending just kind of sucks. And like I said, what I've gathered from this, what I'm assuming is happening, is John is a zombie, even though he does not look like a zombie whatsoever. I mean, doesn't look like him. He's acting completely normal. He's still talking, even though none of the other zombies are speaking. He is still talking. And what I'm assuming is that he has run up and he has killed them, or is going to kill them, or something. And then we cut out and fade to black. Not a very good ending. Did not care for the ending to this. The ending of The Beyond is so much better. Like I said, even though it's similar plot going on, but it's not beat by beat. But the ending of that movie is far superior to the ending of this movie. So that's kind of my main complaint about this, is like I said, that it's just it doesn't make any sense. If I'm wrong about my guesstimation on the ending, if anybody really knows what happened, or if that's not what happened, feel free to comment it below. But that's what I gathered from it. So, yeah, that is City of the Living Dead from 1980, directed by Lucio Fulci, as we said earlier. This is one of those that I really like, and I'll still put on because it's got a really great atmosphere to it, and I love the look of the zombies. I love the gore effects, but it's really kind of all over the place. It's kind of hectic. Like, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of filler in this movie, and it's just... It's not one of the best Fulci movies. Having said that, I do love this movie, and I do enjoy it, and I will go back and watch it at any time. Especially on a cold, windy night. This is a really good movie for that, especially if I'm feeling something Italian, which is quite often because I love Italian horror. Should you see this movie? I think if you are a hardcore Lucio Fulci fan, or just a hardcore Italian horror fan, or Italian zombie fan as well, then I'd say hell yeah, throw it on for sure. But if you're looking for a zombie movie like Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead or any of the Romero zombie films, or even something like Zombie 2, or Zombie Holocaust, or Hell of the Living Dead, or something like that, this is probably not for you. This is a little bit different. This is definitely more of a supernatural film. It's not mainly focused on zombies, which, the title is misleading when you hear City of the Living Dead, or even when you see the poster. It's kind of misleading, but I don't think that's a problem. Like I said, and I think The Gates of Hell is a much stronger title for this movie. I think that it makes a lot more sense than calling it City of the Living Dead, because when you hear that, you think you're going to get something like Dawn of the Dead, or something like that. But again, like I said, if that's not your thing, if you're not an Italian horror fan or a Lucio Fulci fan, then I would say you could definitely skip this. It's not hurting. It wouldn't hurt you none to not see this. Anyway, like I said, that is City of the Living Dead. If your curiosity is just getting the better of you and you want to check it out, it's not very long. It's only like an hour and 30 minutes, something like that. So it's very short. Most Fulci films are fairly short. You might like it. Like I said, it's very atmospheric. I like the setting. I like this film has a thick atmosphere to it, so that's one thing I really like about it. And if you like some hardcore gore, especially old school Fulci style gore, check it out. Like I said, but to each their own. If you feel like it, go for it. But if not, like I said, you're not missing too much. I do want to cover The Beyond, because The Beyond is probably one of my favorite Fulci films. Love that movie, and I do definitely want to talk about House by the Cemetery, because I also really like that movie a lot. That's a good movie, so maybe I'll do those next. I don't know. We'll see. Just kind of how I feel. I just kind of wanted to get this one out of the way, because I was just watched this movie and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna talk about it a little bit. So anyway, until next time, I hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for the next episode of DVD Graveyard. Goodbye.